more defections today as a growing number of House Democrats call on President Biden to drop his re-election bid. Among them, Mark Vesey of Texas. He is the first member of the Congressional Black Caucus to call on Biden to step aside, saying it is the, quote, responsible and patriotic thing to do. Tavis Smiley is a legendary broadcaster, and he's the host and managing editor of the nationally syndicated radio program on KBLA 1580 and podcast Tavis Smiley. He's also an author and an advocate. I mean, your credits are long listed here. But he has his latest book that's ready to come out next month. It's called The Covenant with Black America, 20 Years Later. This is out next August, right after the DNC, in fact. So we're just post RNC. Let's get your thoughts on this news that there's 60 members of the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus. We have the first one publicly saying, Mr. President, it's time to step down. Do you agree with him?
I think that people have agency to make their own choices, decisions, and far be it for me to tell Mr. Vesey how he should respond to this. Here's what I believe, Marla, that you cannot advance democracy, you cannot take democracy seriously by thwarting and ignoring democracy. We've heard from all the elite, indeed, here in Hollywood. We've heard from all the pundit class. We've heard from the chattering class. We've not as yet heard from the Democratic Party delegates. These are the 1,400 people who gave Mr. Biden the nomination. He may not be the best candidate at this point in his career to lead the Democratic Party. That's not for me, you, or anybody else to say. Those delegates need to be heard. And I am troubled by the way the Democrats, frankly, can I just keep it real, are humiliating themselves, are embarrassing themselves. This is a hot mess. And we have not yet heard from the persons who gave him, presumptively, the nomination to begin with. So my thing is this: let the virtual roll call begin. And if the delegates decide that they no longer believe he's the best candidate, the chips will fall where they may, and the process will be what it will be. But at some point, can we at least hear from the people who are involved in making the decision?
Well, and you're making me think of what Sydney Kamlager-Dubb put out today. She basically said that 14 million Americans, let's not forget them, that they gave him this opportunity, so let's not ignore them. Speaking of, so AP NORC poll came out this week, and it found that overall, in terms of Americans, 70% want Biden to withdraw from the race, 65% of Democrats. But then when you break it down further to black Democrats, it's split, 49%. Explain the difference. What is the difference there?
Well, there are two things I see in that poll. Number one, black people never have been, are not now, never will be a monolith, and that's important. We are not monolithic, number one. Again, people have agency to make their own choices. Number two, black folk have always been the base, the most loyal base of the Democratic Party. And as a result, we've oftentimes not just saved the Democratic Party, but we've saved, frankly, this democracy from itself. When black folk came to Joe Biden's rescue in South Carolina, those black people, black women in particular, James Clyburn and others in that state, and then the rest of the black folk in America got behind them, as did the Democratic Party. They didn't just save his campaign. Indeed, they saved democracy then from the existential threat that Donald Trump represented. We've done that time and time again. So black folk are not a monolith, but we are the most loyal base of the party. Oftentimes, I believe that Democrats take that for granted. They exploit that. Republicans too often ignore that. But that poll makes it clear that black people, more than anybody else at this point, still have the president's back. Not surprised at all.
It seems that if, in fact, he does choose to step aside, that Kamala Harris, the vice president, would step in. Do you think that she is the winning ticket for the Democrat?
I don't think that anybody ought to be fiated into that position. That's my personal view. Just because you're the vice president, you were chosen and selected as his running mate. That may give you the inside track. But I believe in fundamental fairness. I believe in an open process. And I believe if that process is open, she may still be the nominee anyway if he decides to step aside. But there ought to be fundamental fairness in the process. And being vice president doesn't automatically fiat you to the front of the line.
Your thoughts on it? You called it right now a hot mess in terms of where the Democrats are. There's so much unity behind the Republican Party, as we saw play out in Milwaukee at the RNC. What did you think of the RNC? What did you think of Donald Trump's speech last night?
And that's the sad part. Donald Trump has given the Democrats so much to work with, so much to play with, right? And in this moment, they're just MIA, frankly. It just can't get their act together. He started out in that speech, I thought, on message. The first 20, 22 minutes, I was impressed. I'm not a Donald Trump fan by far, but he was on point the first 20 minutes, and then true to his DNA, he went off the range, and then 92 minutes later, 92 minutes of my life that I cannot get back, 92 minutes later, he shows us once again who he really is. I was hopeful, and time will tell, that that assassination attempt, thankfully it did not succeed. I'm glad he's here. I don't wish that on anybody. I don't stoop that low, even if I disagree with you vehemently politically. So I'm glad he survived that. But I was hoping, Marla, that that might do something to temper him, to change him. But I said to my audience yesterday that change is inevitable, but growth is optional. You have to choose to grow. There's a big difference. And we'll see if he chooses to grow after this experiment. But he didn't show that the other night in that speech.
He was a lot more, his tone was a lot more measured, I would say that.
Initially, yeah.
Initially,
Yeah.
okay. So the book, you can learn more about the vote and the importance of the black vote in his new book that's set to be released next month. It's called, once again, The Covenant with Black America 20 Years Later. It is out August 27th, but guess what? You can pre-order that now. Tavis, always an honor and a pleasure to have you in
Marla,
studio.
thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.